25 of the world's most elite cybersecurity geniuses had spent a week trying to crack the code, and they had failed. But a shivering, soaking wet delivery girl, who nobody thought was worth a second glance, walked in and solved the puzzle in under 30 seconds. She thought she was just delivering noodles, but she had just unlocked the darkest secrets of the Korean underworld. And the man watching from the shadows? He wasn't just a boss. He was a predator looking for his next meal. Before we dive into this dangerous game of cat and mouse, you need to make a choice. Are you ready to see what happens when an ordinary girl outsmarts a room full of arrogant experts? If you want to know if she survives the night, smash that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications because, trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of the twist that's coming up. The sky over Seoul had torn open, weeping a deluge of cold, gray water that slicked the asphalt of Gangnam into black mirrors, reflecting the fractured neon soul of a city that refused to sleep. Rain lashed against the glass skin of the Kang Tower, a monolith of obsidian steel that pierced the clouds, standing like a dark sentinel over the district. It was a fortress of wealth, a vertical palace where the air was filtered, the light was curated, and the power was absolute. But on the 50th floor, inside a conference room that cost more to furnish than most people earned in a lifetime, the atmosphere was not one of power. It was one of suffocating, sweaty desperation. For 7 agonizing days, the air in that room had grown stale, thick with the smell of cooling coffee, stale takeout, and the sour tang of masculine failure. 25 men and women sat hunched over glowing terminals, their faces pale and illuminated by the harsh blue light of monitors that mocked them. These weren't amateurs. These were the elite. Graduates from Seoul National University, MIT, Stanford, former intelligence officers, legendary hackers turned white-hat consultants, cryptographers who dreamt in binary. They commanded hourly rates that could buy a small car. And for 168 hours, they had been completely, utterly humiliated. The object of their torment was a digital vault. A ghostly drive seized during a police raid that had gone wrong, a drive that contained the encrypted nervous system of the Kang crime syndicate. It held the names of politicians bought with blood money, the GPS coordinates of buried bodies, and the ledger of bribes that kept the Kang family above the law for 3 generations. The police couldn't crack it. The military couldn't crack it. So, the Kang family had stolen it back, and now, ironically, they couldn't crack it either. They had locked themselves out of their own kingdom. The encryption was a nightmare. It wasn't just code, it was a labyrinth. It shifted, it breathed, it adapted. Every time one of the experts tried to force a key, the lock changed its shape. The conference room was a graveyard of crumpled paper and crushed egos. Notepads filled with complex algorithms and frantic scribbles littered the floor. Tempers were fraying. These were people accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, accustomed to bending technology to their will. But tonight, they were being humbled by a ghost in the machine. They were exhausted, fueled only by chemical energy drinks and the terrifying knowledge of who had hired them. Failure here didn't just mean losing a contract, it meant disappearing. It was exactly 2:37 in the morning. The rhythm of the rain against the glass was hypnotic, a steady drumbeat of despair. Most of the experts were staring blankly at the walls, their minds numb. A few had their heads on their desks, surrendering to the fatigue. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the server racks and the soft whir of cooling fans. Then, the pneumatic hiss of the double doors sliding open shattered the quiet. Nari Song stepped into the room, and the temperature seemed to drop. She was a dripping mess, a drowned rat in a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big for her rail-thin frame. Rainwater streamed from her helmet, which she clutched under one arm, and plastered her dark bangs to her forehead. In her trembling hands, she held a plastic bag that steamed in the cool air of the server room, 3 bowls of jjajangmyeon, black bean noodles, smelling rich and savory, a stark contrast to the sterile scent of ozone and despair. She was nobody. A 24-year-old university dropout who lived her life on 2 wheels, weaving through the lethal Seoul traffic for 18 hours a day. She was the invisible grease that kept the city's engine running, a girl who sprinted up stairwells and braved typhoons to feed people who wouldn't even deign to look her in the eye when they snatched their food. She lived in a shoebox apartment in the shadows of the wealthy districts, caring for a grandmother whose lungs were slowly filling with fluid, fading away like an old photograph. Nari was a ghost in her own city, spectral and unseen. "Delivery," she announced. Her voice was small, cracked from dehydration and the chill of the storm, barely audible over the hum of the computers. Nobody moved. Nobody looked up. To them, she was less than furniture. She was a biological drone. Finally, the team leader, a man with heavy bags under his eyes and a tie loosened at his collar, waved a dismissive hand toward the back of the room without turning his head. "Just put it there," he muttered, gesturing vaguely at a table piled high with electronic debris. Nari sighed internally, shifting the weight of the bag. Her shoes, cheap sneakers wrapped in plastic bags to keep the water out, squelched wetly against the plush, 1,000,001 carpet as she navigated the maze of desks. She was tired. Her bones ached with a deep, marrow-level exhaustion that sleep never seemed to cure. She just wanted to drop the noodles, get her delivery fee, and maybe, if she was lucky, get home before dawn. As she walked past the main console, her eyes drifted to the massive central screen that dominated the front of the room. It was a wall of cascading data, a waterfall of red and green code that flowed endlessly, mocking the geniuses in the room. And then, something happened. Nari stopped. The plastic bag of noodles swung gently from her fingers. She blinked, her brown eyes locking onto the screen. To the experts, it was a chaotic jumble of hexadecimal failure. But to Nari, it wasn't chaos. It was music. It was a visual cadence, a rhythm that she felt in her chest. A pattern emerged from the static, sharp and clear. It triggered a memory, a flash of a life she had lived before poverty crushed her throat under its boot. It reminded her of late nights in the library at Seoul National University, of the beauty of theoretical cryptography, of the elegance of numbers that danced. She saw the sequence. It was a modified Fibonacci spiral overlaid with a visual cipher based on traditional Korean knotwork. It was beautiful. And it was stuck. Without thinking, driven by an instinct that hadn't been extinguished by years of delivering fried chicken and noodles, she stepped toward the nearest unoccupied keyboard. The noodles were forgotten in her left hand. Her right hand hovered over the mechanical keys. She didn't look around. She didn't ask for permission. She just typed. Click, clack, click. 3 lines of code. Simple. Elegant. Surgical. It took 30 seconds. She hit enter. The massive screen froze. The cascading red waterfall halted, shuddered, and then dissolved into a brilliant, blinding green. The digital tumblers clicked into place with a sound that seemed to echo inside everyone's skull. Access granted. The vault unlocked. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the lungs of 25 stunned experts. Chairs scraped back as heads snapped up. Eyes widened in disbelief. They stared at the screen, then at the girl. Nari stood there, water dripping from the hem of her cheap raincoat, creating a dark puddle on the expensive gray carpet. She blinked, suddenly realizing what she had done, snapping back to reality. The noodle bag crinkled in her hand. She had no idea that she had just signed her own death warrant. Because in the deepest shadows at the back of the room, in a corner so dark it seemed to swallow the light, a man was watching. He had been there the whole time, silent, still as a statue, observing the failure of his expensive employees. But now he was leaning forward. Dae-hyun Kang, the heir to the Kang Syndicate, the Prince of Seoul's underbelly. He was a myth, a monster in a bespoke Italian suit. He was the man who kept the city's nightmares organized. His face was sharp, angular, devastatingly handsome, but possessing eyes that were dead, cold glaciers that had seen and ordered unspeakable things. Before we see how the devil reacts to an angel breaking his lock, I need you to drop a comment below. Where are you watching from tonight? And be honest, are you already Team Nari? If the story of a girl who everyone ignored suddenly becoming the most important person in the room hits you right in the feels, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this deserve to be told, and we are just getting started. Dae-hyun stepped out of the shadows. His movement was fluid, predatory, like a panther slipping through tall grass. His leather shoes made absolutely no sound on the carpet. The experts, finally shaking off their paralysis, turned to see their master approaching. They paled, shrinking back into their chairs, terrified that his wrath for their failure was about to descend. But Daehyun didn't even look at them. His gaze was laser-focused on the dripping wet delivery girl standing in front of the open vault. Who? Daehyun asked, his voice a low baritone that slid over the room like ice over steel. Gave you permission to touch that terminal? It wasn't a question. It was a vibration in the air. It was an accusation. It was a promise of violence. Nari spun around, startled. Her grip on the plastic bag failed. The container of jjajangmyeon slipped, hit the floor, and exploded. Thick, black bean sauce splattered across the pristine white cuffs of the nearest expert and sprayed in a dark arc across the expensive carpet. Nari froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, each beat screaming run, run, run. She looked up, her eyes wide, and found herself staring into the face of a man who radiated danger the way the sun radiates heat. She knew who he was. Everyone in the slums knew the face of the Kang family, even if they never spoke the name aloud. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, trembling so hard her teeth threatened to chatter. She dropped to her knees, instinctively trying to scoop up the spilled noodles with her bare hands, a futile, desperate gesture of servitude. I was delivering the food. I saw the pattern. It just reminded me of something I studied. I didn't mean to. Daehyun's eyes narrowed. He looked down at her red, raw hands scraping up the mess, at the pathetic curve of her spine. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. What did you study? He asked. His tone was devoid of emotion, flat and terrifying. Nari swallowed hard. The sauce was warm and sticky on her fingers. She knew her next words could be her last. Computer science, she whispered, looking up at him through her wet bangs. At Seoul National University. I was on a full scholarship. Before I had to drop out. The room remained deathly silent. The experts looked from the girl to the boss, waiting for the execution. This was Daehyun Kang, a man who had once ordered a restaurant burned to the ground because the chef had disrespected his father. A man who solved problems by erasing them. But Daehyun didn't call for his guards. He didn't draw a weapon. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black phone, and pressed a single button. Junaseo. Come up. The call ended. Less than 2 minutes later, the elevator chimed. A tall man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his jawline walked in. Junaseo. Daehyun's right hand. The executioner. The man whose silhouette was the last thing many enemies of the Kang family ever saw. Check what she did, Daehyun ordered, gesturing vaguely toward the computer with a tilt of his chin. Junaseo sat down at the terminal, pushing the stunned expert out of the way. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He checked the logs. He checked the integrity of the unlock. He verified the encryption break. He paused. He checked it again. Junaseo looked up, and for the first time in a decade, genuine shock registered on his scarred features. She broke it, boss, Junaseo said, his voice rough with disbelief. Cleanly. The pattern recognition sequence she used. It's elegant. It's brilliant. She bypassed the brute force blocks by recognizing the visual aesthetic of the code itself. She saw what 25 people missed for a week. Daehyun turned his gaze back to Nari. She was standing now, wiping her sauce-stained hands on her pants, shivering uncontrollably. She looked small, fragile, breakable. But there was something in her eyes, a spark of defiance, a steel core wrapped in fear, that refused to be extinguished. Who are you? Daehyun asked softly. And this time, it sounded dangerous. Nari lifted her chin. If she was going to die, she wouldn't die cowering. My name is Nari Song. I'm a delivery rider for Quick Bites. I deliver food all over Seoul, day and night, rain or shine. That's who I am. I didn't ask what you do, Daehyun said, taking a step closer, invading her personal space until she could smell the expensive sandalwood cologne he wore, masking the scent of rain. I asked who you are. Nari took a deep breath. I was the top student in the computer science department 3 years ago. My parents died in a ferry accident when I was 19. I was left raising my younger brother and supporting my grandmother. I had dreams, Mr. Kong. dreams of working for a tech giant, of building security systems that protected people. Then my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The scholarship covered tuition, not chemo. So I dropped out. I work 3 jobs. I live in a 1-room basement in Gumho-dong. I am nobody. Just another ghost in this city trying to survive one more day. Dae-hyun stood motionless. His face was a mask unreadable. The experts held their breath. Nari had just spoken to the Dragon of Soul as if he were a human being. Then, Dae-hyun did something that sent shockwaves through the room. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile, Dae-hyun Kong didn't smile, but it was an expression of amused respect. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you will come to my office here at Kong Tower. That is not a request. Nari blinked, confusion warring with her fear. For what? To deliver more noodles? Or to explain to your experts how to do their jobs? To show me what else you can do, Dae-hyun replied, his voice cool. And to discuss how much you are worth to me. Nari stared at him for a long moment. Then she bent down, picked up her empty delivery bag, and slung it over her shoulder. She turned to walk toward the door, her wet sneakers squeaking. Before she stepped out, she paused and turned back to face the most dangerous man in Korea. Fine. I'll come. But you owe me for those spilled noodles. They were my last delivery of the night, and if I don't collect, the agency docks my pay. She walked out, the doors hissing shut behind her, leaving 25 experts and 1 crime lord staring into the empty space she had occupied. Dae-hyun watched her go, and for the first time in years, he felt a pulse of something unfamiliar in his chest. Interest. The ride back to Gumho-dong was a blur of rain and adrenaline. Nari's hands shook so badly she almost tipped her scooter twice on the slick curves of the Han River Bridge. By the time she reached her neighborhood, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by the crushing weight of her reality. She pushed open the rusted metal door of her basement apartment. It groaned on its hinges, a sound that echoed her own soul. She stepped inside, not bothering to turn on the light. The darkness was kinder. It hid the mold staining the wallpaper, the peeling vinyl of the floor, the water spots on the ceiling that grew like tumors with every rainstorm. This was her life. 12 square meters of damp misery. She tiptoed across the room to the corner where a thin mattress lay on the floor. Grandmother's song was asleep, her breathing raspy and wet, a rattling sound that tore at Nari's heart. Her face was gaunt, cheeks hollowed out, skin the color of old parchment. The cancer was eating her alive, cell by cell, and Nari was helpless to stop it. Nari knelt beside her, gently pulling the thin, worn blanket up to her grandmother's chin. She brushed a wisp of gray hair from the old woman's forehead. This woman had saved her when her parents drowned. She had sold her wedding jewelry to pay for Nari's first semester of college. And now she was dying in a damp basement because Nari couldn't make the numbers work. She moved to the small, wobbly table in the kitchen area. A stack of envelopes sat there like a judgment. Red stamps. Final notice. Eviction warning. Medical payment overdue. And the worst one, a letter from her brother's high school. Scholarship revoked due to truancy. Her brother, once a brilliant student, was slipping away, drawn into the gravity of the street gangs, looking for the easy money and respect that Nari couldn't give him. She sat down on a plastic stool and buried her face in her cracked, rough hands. She allowed herself exactly 60 seconds. 1 minute to cry. 1 minute to feel the terror that clawed at her throat. 1 minute to acknowledge that she was drowning. Then she wiped her eyes. She stood up. She was Nari Song. She didn't break. The encounter with Dae-hyun Kang played over and over in her mind. She wasn't naive. She knew what the Kang Syndicate was. They were monsters. They used people like tissues and threw them away. But he had offered a discussion about her worth. And right now, her worth was the only thing that could buy her grandmother time, buy her brother a future. She looked at her hands. These hands had just broken a code that baffled geniuses. Maybe, just maybe, they could break the cycle of poverty that was strangling her family. Can you believe what is happening to Nari? If you have ever felt the weight of the world on your shoulders, if you have ever been underestimated, hit that like button right now. We are only getting started. Comment below, should she trust Dae-hyun? Or is she walking into a trap? Don't forget to subscribe, because the next part of this story is going to leave you breathless. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, washing Seoul in a deceptive golden light. The Kong Tower stood like a needle of glass, piercing the sky. Nari stood at the base, looking up, squinting against the glare. Her neck ached. It felt like looking up at Mount Olympus from the depths of Tartarus. She had done her best. She had washed her hair in the sink with cold water because the boiler was broken again. She had ironed her one good white shirt, the one she had saved from her university days, though it was fraying at the cuffs. She had polished her worn shoes until they shone, trying to hide the scuffs of 1,000 miles of asphalt. She walked into the lobby. It was a cathedral of marble and intimidation. The floor was Italian stone, polished to a mirror finish. The air smelled of money, crisp, cool, and filtered. Everyone around her moved with purpose, wearing suits that cost more than her apartment. She approached the reception desk. The security guard, a man with a jaw like a block of granite and a suit that fit too perfectly, looked her up and down. His lip curled. "I have an appointment with Mr. Daehyun Kang." 9 a.m., Nari said. She forced her voice to be steady, though her knees felt like water. The guard let out a short, derisive huff. "You? Have an appointment with the chairman? And who exactly are you?" The cleaning crew enters through the back. "I am Nari Song," she said, straightening her spine. "Check the list." The guard didn't even look at his screen. "Leave, little girl, before I toss you out." Nari opened her mouth to argue, but a voice cut through the lobby like a whip crack. "She is expected." Junaseo stepped out of a private elevator. In the daylight, his scar looked even more menacing, a jagged line of violence on a stoic face. The guard snapped to attention so fast his heels clicked. He bowed deeply, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "Mr. Han." I didn't know." Clearly, Junaseo said, his voice dry. He looked at Nari. "Come." Nari followed him, feeling the eyes of the entire lobby burning into her back. The whispers started instantly. Who is she? Why is the right hand escorting her? Is she a mistress? A charity case? They entered the private elevator. There were no buttons, just a card reader. Junaseo tapped his pass and they shot upward. The city fell away beneath them, turning into a toy set. "Don't speak unless spoken to," Junaseo advised, staring straight ahead at the metal doors. "And don't lie to him. He smells lies." The doors opened onto the penthouse floor. It wasn't an office, it was a throne room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the sprawl of Seoul. The furniture was sparse, modern, and dark. A massive desk made of a single slab of black walnut sat in the center of the room. Daehyun Kang stood by the window, his back to her, looking out over the city he ruled. He turned as she entered. In the harsh light of day, he was even more imposing. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. His eyes were intelligent, assessing, and utterly devoid of warmth. "You're on time," he said. "I can't afford to waste time," Nari replied, clutching the strap of her bag. "And neither can you, apparently." Daehyun's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "Sit." She sat in the leather chair opposite his desk. It was soft, swallowing her up. Daehyun sat opposite her. He placed a tablet on the desk and slid it across to her. "Last night, you humiliated my staff. I want to know how." Nari looked at the tablet. It showed a replay of her typing the code. The encryption was based on a mathematical sequence, she explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about the one thing she loved. But the visual interface was the key. It was a mandala, a chaos pattern. Most cryptographers look for the math first. I looked for the art. I saw the flaw in the knot. I just untied it. Daehyun studied her face. "You see patterns. I see order where others see noise," she corrected. "It's just how my brain is wired." Daehyun nodded slowly. He tapped a few keys on his own keyboard, and the image on the tablet changed. It was now a spreadsheet. Columns of numbers, transaction logs, banking routing codes. It was dense, boring, and seemingly random. "What do you see here?" he asked. Nari looked down. Her eyes started across the columns. To anyone else, it was data. To her, it was a narrative. "Someone is stealing from you," she said instantly. Daehyun didn't blink. "Go on." "Here," she pointed to a row. "And here. And here." Small transfers. always on the 15th of the month. Always odd numbers. They are routed through shell accounts, but the destination IP bounces back to a server in Singapore. But the timing, it aligns with your payroll cycle. Whoever is doing this is internal. They are shaving fractions of a percent off the top. Over 3 years, that's roughly 2.1 billion won. Dae-hyun sat back. He exchanged a glance with Jun Seo, who was standing by the door like a sentinel. Jun Seo gave a nearly imperceptible nod. How can you be sure? Dae-hyun asked. Because the math doesn't lie, Nari said. People lie. Numbers don't. The variance in these accounts follows a sequence. It's a signature. Someone thinks they are being clever, hiding it in the noise. But the noise has a rhythm. What would you do? Set a trap, Nari said, her mind racing. Authorize a larger transfer on the 15th. Tag the data packets with a silent tracker. When they siphon it off, the tracker goes with it. You'll trace it right to their personal account. Dae-hyun stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. Nari felt sweat trickling down her back. Had she said too much? You have a valuable mind, Nari-song, Dae-hyun said finally. I am willing to pay for it. I want you to work for me. Directly. You report to me. You analyze what I give you. You tell no one. Nari's heart skipped a beat. And the pay? 20 times what you make delivering noodles. Plus full medical benefits for you and your immediate family. VIP access to Seoul National Hospital. The air left Nari's lungs. 20 times. Medical benefits. It meant her grandmother would get the best doctors. It meant chemo. It meant life. It meant her brother could go back to school. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. And if I refuse? Then you leave. I won't kill you, Dae-hyun said, his tone casual. You are talented, but you are not a threat yet. But the offer dies when you walk out that door. You go back to the basement. Back to the rain. Back to watching your grandmother fade away. It was cruel. It was manipulative. And it was effective. I accept, Nari said. But I have conditions. Jun Seo stiffened by the door. Nobody gave Dae-hyun Kong conditions. Dae-hyun leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Conditions. My grandmother needs to be admitted to the cancer center today. Not next week. Today. My brother needs to be enrolled in a proper academy, one that will keep him off the streets. And I want a contract. A contract that states I will never be asked to do anything violent. I will fix your codes. I will find your thieves. But I will not hurt people. Dae-hyun looked at her, really looked at her for a long moment. Then a short, rusty sound escaped his lips. A laugh. Agreed, he said. Your grandmother will be moved within the hour. Your brother will attend the best academy in Gangnam. And your hands will remain clean. I have Jun Seo for the dirty work. He extended a hand across the desk. Nari looked at it. The hand of a monster. The hand of her savior. She reached out and shook it. His grip was warm, firm, and electric. You don't own me, she whispered, more to herself than him. We shall see, Dae-hyun replied. The transformation was instantaneous. By noon, an ambulance with the logo of Seoul National Hospital was parked outside her basement apartment. 2 paramedics treated her grandmother like royalty, gently lifting her onto a stretcher. Nari watched, tears blurring her vision, as the old woman was whisked away to a private suite that Nari could never have afforded in 100 lifetimes. Her brother was pulled from the street corner where he hung out with thugs, cleaned up, and placed in a dormitory that looked like a 5-star hotel. And Nari was given an office on the 49th floor. It was sleek, modern, with a computer that hummed with raw power. She sat in the chair, spinning it slowly. Below her, the city looked small. But as the sun set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red, Nari couldn't shake the feeling of dread. She had sold her skills to the devil. And as she looked up at the ceiling, knowing Dae-hyun was just 1 floor above her, watching, calculating, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just an employee. She was his new favorite puzzle. And puzzles were made to be solved. The glass walls of Nari-song's new office on the 49th floor didn't just offer a view, they offered a perspective shift that was dizzying. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking up at the city from the gutter, she was looking down at it from the clouds. Her first week at the Kang Syndicate, now publicly rebranding under the sterile, legitimate name of Kongtech Solutions, was a blur of efficiency. Nari didn't just work. She surgically dismantled the chaotic, rot-filled code that held Daehyun's empire together and rebuilt it into a fortress. She was a virtuoso, and the keyboard was her instrument. On her second day, the trap she had designed snapped shut. The tracker she had embedded in the financial stream lit up like a flare in the dark. The thief wasn't a nameless hacker in a basement. It was Daehyun's own second cousin, a man who sat on the board of directors, a man who had smiled at Nari in the elevator. He had been bleeding the company dry for years, protected by blood ties and arrogance. Nari watched from her screen as Jun Seo, the silent executor, walked into the cousin's office. She didn't see what happened next. She didn't need to. The signal from the cousin's computer went dead, and the embezzlement stopped instantly. In the world of Daehyun Kong, justice was swift, silent, and final. By the end of the second week, Nari had become indispensable. She was the gatekeeper. Nothing digital moved in or out of the Kang network without her permission. She worked with a feverish intensity, often forgetting that time existed, staying until the city lights below turned into a sprawling galaxy of amber and white. It was during these late, quiet hours that the dynamic shifted. It started with food. Not the plastic-wrapped convenience store kimbap she was used to, but silver carts wheeled in by silent servers. Truffle risotto, seared scallops, wagyu beef that melted on the tongue. And then, Daehyun himself would appear. He would leave his throne on the 50th floor and come down to her sanctuary. He wouldn't speak about business. He would sit on the edge of her desk, loosening his silk tie, and they would eat together in the soft glow of the monitors. "Have you ever read Camus?" he asked one night, swirling a glass of vintage Bordeaux that cost more than Nari's brother's tuition. "Only the parts about the absurdity of life," Nari replied, not looking up from her code, though her heart rate spiked on the biometric monitor she wore on her wrist. "It seemed fitting when I was delivering chicken during a typhoon." Daehyun chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated in the quiet room. "You have a sharp tongue, Nari. Most people are too busy trembling to speak to me." "I've seen you eat spicy tteokbokki and get sauce on your chin," she said, finally looking at him. "It's hard to be terrified of someone when you know they have a weakness for street food." Daehyun's eyes softened. For a fleeting second, the mask of the crime lord slipped, revealing a man who was lonely, burdened, and surprisingly human. "Perhaps you are the only one who sees me, Nari. Not the title. Not the money. Just me." The air between them grew thick, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the servers. Nari felt a magnetic pull, a terrifying gravity drawing her toward this dangerous, beautiful man. She found herself waiting for these moments, hoarding them like treasures. She was falling. And she knew, with a sinking dread, that falling for a man like Daehyun Kang was like falling off a cliff. The drop was exhilarating, but the landing would destroy her. Then, the crash came. It was the third week. Nari was waiting for the elevator, clutching a file of security protocols she needed Daehyun to sign. The bell chimed, and the doors slid open. But it wasn't an empty car. Standing inside was a woman who looked like she had been carved from diamond and ice. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a crimson designer suit that screamed power. Her hair was a glossy waterfall of black silk, her makeup flawless. She radiated a kind of aggressive perfection that made Nari feel instantly shabby, despite her new clothes. "Oh," the woman said. Her voice was melodic, but cold. Like a wind chime in a graveyard. "You must be the little stray I've heard so much about. Nari, isn't it? The delivery girl who plays with computers." Nari stiffened, her grip on the file tightening. "I am the head of cybersecurity. And you are." The woman stepped out, towering over Nari in her stilettos. She smiled, but her eyes remained dead. "I am Yura Han," she said, "daughter of Chairman Han. And Daehyun's fiancé." The world stopped. The sound of the office, the hum of the AC, the distant city noise, it all vanished. All Nari could hear was the rushing of blood in her ears. "Fiancé. I didn't know," Nari stammered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Didn't you?" Yura laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "How strange. It's the merger of the century. The Kang and Han syndicates uniting to rule Seoul. The wedding is in 3 months. But I suppose Daehyun doesn't discuss important matters with the help." The help. The insult landed like a physical slap. Before Nari could respond, the private elevator doors opened again. Daehyun stepped out. He froze when he saw them. The tension in the hallway spiked instantly. "You're Daehyun said. His voice wasn't warm. It was resigned. "I wasn't expecting you." Clearly, Yura purred, walking over to him and sliding her arm through his, claiming him. She looked at Nari with a triumphant smirk. "I came to surprise you. Your mother is frantic about the floral arrangements for the ceremony. We need to make decisions." Nari looked at Daehyun. She searched his eyes for a denial, for an explanation, for anything. But she saw only a wall. He looked trapped, a king in a cage of gold and obligation. "I should go," Nari whispered, backing away. "The security protocols can wait." "Yes," Yura said, dismissing her with a wave of a manicured hand. "Run along. We have a future to plan." Nari turned and walked away, her dignity barely intact. She didn't run until she was in the stairwell. Then she fled, her heart breaking with every step down. She had been a fool. A stupid, naive fool. She had thought she was special. She had thought the connection between them was real. But to men like Daehyun, she was just a novelty. A bright toy to pass the time before he returned to his real life of dynasties and mergers. The tension is unbearable. Can you believe Daehyun kept this a secret? If your heart is breaking for Nari right now, hit that like button. We're halfway through, and the danger is just beginning. Drop a comment. Do you think Yura is just a jealous fiancé, or is she hiding something darker? Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because the twist coming up will change everything. Nari did what she always did when life tried to crush her. She worked. She buried her heartbreak under mountains of code. She arrived before dawn and left after midnight, avoiding the 50th floor, avoiding Daehyun. She became a ghost again, haunting the servers she protected. But her mind, trained to see patterns, couldn't stop working. 2 months passed. The wedding preparations consumed the tower. But late one evening, while running a routine diagnostic on the internal network, Nari saw it. A glitch. A tiny, microscopic anomaly in the data stream. To anyone else, it was nothing. A packet loss. A server hiccup. But to Nari, it was a heartbeat that skipped. She traced it. Her fingers flew across the keys, her heartbreak forgotten, replaced by the cold focus of the hunt. The anomaly wasn't a glitch. It was a backdoor. Someone was accessing the deepest, most sensitive files of the Kang Syndicate, Daehyun's personal schedule, his security detail rotations, the layout of the safe house. And the access was coming from inside the building. Nari narrowed the search. Floor 48. The guest suites. Specifically, the suite assigned to Yura Han for the wedding planning. Nari felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She set up a mirror protocol, watching in real time as Yura, or someone using her terminal, downloaded the files. But they weren't just stealing data. They were communicating. Encrypted messages were being beamed out to a server that Nari recognized. It belonged to the head of security for the Han family, Yura's father. Nari decrypted the messages. It took her 10 minutes. When she read them, her blood ran cold. Phase 1 complete. Security grid mapping acquired. Target, Daehyun Kang. Date, the wedding day. Objective, elimination and absorption. It wasn't a marriage. It was a coup. Yura wasn't planning a wedding, she was planning an execution. The Han family intended to decapitate the Kang leadership at the ceremony and swallow their empire whole. And Yura was the architect. Nari sat back, trembling. She held the life of the man who broke her heart in her hands. She could delete the logs. She could walk away. She could let the monsters eat each other. But then she remembered the way he had looked at her over a plate of risotto. She remembered how he had saved her grandmother. She remembered the man beneath the monster. She grabbed the hard drive and ran. It was 7 a.m. The sun was bleeding over the horizon. Nari burst onto the 50th floor, ignoring the startled protests of the early morning cleaning crew. She didn't knock. She shoved open the heavy oak doors of Daehyun's office. He was there, standing by the window, staring out at the city like a statue of loneliness. He turned, his face hardening when he saw her, but his eyes betrayed a desperate hunger. "Nari," he said, his voice rough. "You haven't been here in weeks." "Shut up and look at this," she said, breathless, slamming the hard drive onto his desk. She pulled up the files. The stolen schematics. The assassination plans. The messages between URA and her father's hit squad. Daehyun watched the screen. His face didn't change, but the air in the room grew heavy, charged with a terrifying violence. He read every line. He saw the betrayal laid out in cold, digital text. You knew, Nari whispered, watching him. You suspected. Suspicion is not proof, Daehyun said quietly. I knew the Han family was ambitious. I didn't think URA would be the one to hold the knife. They are going to kill you at the altar, Nari said, her voice shaking. They want to take everything. Daehyun finally looked away from the screen and locked eyes with her. Why did you bring this to me? You could have let me die. After how I treated you after URA. Because you saved my family, Nari said, stepping closer, her anger warring with her love. Because I don't break my contracts. And because I couldn't stand a world where you don't exist. Daehyun moved. In 2 strides, he closed the distance between them. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward him. For a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. The air crackled with unsaid words, with the memory of late nights and shared silence. Thank you, he murmured, his thumb brushing the pulse point of her wrist. Now go. Go home. Lock your doors. I have a war to start, and I need to know you are safe. Daehyun. Go, he commanded, his eyes flashing with a terrifying intensity. If you stay here, you're a target. Leave. Now. Nari fled. She left the tower, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She had done her part. She had saved him. Now she just had to survive. She rode her scooter back to her new apartment, a secure, upscale unit Daehyun had provided. She needed to sleep. She needed to forget. She collapsed onto the sofa, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up to her. She drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by images of red dresses and blood. She woke to the buzzing of her phone. It was late afternoon. The light in the room was dim and gray. She picked up the phone. A text message. Unknown number. Her breath hitched. She opened it. It was a photo. Her brother. Tied to a metal chair. His face bruised, lips split, eyes wide with terror. Below the photo, a simple message. We know what you found. We know who you told. If you want the boy to live, bring the hard drive backups to the old textile factory in Mullidong. Come alone. Tell no one. You have 1 hour. Nari screamed. It was a sound of pure, animal panic. She didn't think. She didn't call Daehyun. The message said tell no one. She couldn't risk her brother's life. She grabbed her keys. She didn't take the company car. It had a tracker. She ran down to the basement storage and pulled the tarp off her old, battered delivery scooter. The engine sputtered to life, a familiar, rattletrap sound. She tore into the streets of Seoul, weaving through the gridlock, running red lights, terrified tears streaming down her face. Mullidong was the industrial gut of the city, a maze of rusted iron and abandoned dreams. She arrived at the factory as the sun began to set, casting long, skeletal shadows across the broken pavement. The factory loomed above her, a rotting carcass of concrete and steel. Nari parked the scooter. She walked toward the gaping maw of the entrance, her hands trembling uncontrollably. I'm here, she screamed into the darkness. I'm here. Let him go. A slow, mocking applause echoed from the shadows. From behind a rusted pillar, URA Han stepped out. She was still wearing the red suit, but now it looked like the color of fresh blood. She looked at Nari with a mixture of pity and disgust. The loyal little dog returns, URA sneered. I knew you'd come. You poor people are so predictable. So sentimental. Where is he? Nari demanded, stepping forward. Oh, he's safe. URA waved a hand dismissively. That photo was from days ago. My cousin Gunwoo had a little chat with him. Just insurance. Nari froze. You lied. Of course I lied, URA smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. I needed to flush you out. You see, Nari, you've become a problem. You see things you shouldn't see. You whisper in Daehyun's ear. A heavy footstep crunched on the gravel behind Nari. She spun around. Blocking the exit was a mountain of a man. He had a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite and then smashed with a hammer. Gunwoo Han. The Han family's enforcer. The butcher. He grinned, revealing teeth that had been filed into sharp points. He held a hunting knife in one hand, the blade glinting dully in the fading light. My cousin is very upset, Gunwoo said, his voice a gravelly rumble. You ruined the wedding surprise. Now we have to improvise. Kill her, URA ordered, checking her nails. Make it slow. I want Daehyun to find her in pieces. Gunwoo lunged. Nari scrambled back, tripping over a piece of rebar, falling hard onto the concrete. Gunwoo was on her in a second, his heavy hand clamping around her throat, pinning her to the ground. The smell of stale tobacco and blood overwhelmed her. She clawed at his hands, kicking, screaming, but he was immovable. He raised the knife. Say goodbye, delivery girl, Gunwoo grunted. Nari squeezed her eyes shut, her brother's face flashing in her mind. I'm sorry. I tried. Crash. Glass exploded from the skylight 40 feet above them. A dark shape plummeted from the ceiling, rappelling down a cable with the speed of a striking cobra. Boots hit the concrete with a heavy thud. Gunwoo looked up, distracted. Daehyun Kang stood there. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was dressed in tactical black gear, a suppressed pistol in his hand, and a look of absolute, apocalyptic fury on his face. Get away from her, Daehyun roared, the sound echoing like thunder. Behind him, the side doors of the factory burst open. Juna Seo and a squad of Kong enforcers flooded the room, weapons raised. Gunwoo didn't let go. Instead, he yanked Nari up by her hair, dragging her in front of him like a shield, pressing the cold blade of the knife against her jugular. Back off, Kong, Gunwoo shouted, spittle flying. Or I open her up right here. The factory fell silent. A standoff. Daehyun's gun was leveled at Gunwoo's head, but Nari was in the way. He couldn't shoot. Nari met Daehyun's eyes. She saw the fear in them, the terror of losing her. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't just a puzzle to him. She was everything. She couldn't let him lose. Nari remembered the self-defense moves she had learned delivering food in the worst neighborhoods of Seoul. She stopped struggling. She went limp. Gunwoo, surprised by the sudden lack of resistance, shifted his grip slightly. That was all she needed. Nari drove her elbow back with every ounce of strength she possessed, smashing it into Gunwoo's solar plexus. At the same time, she stomped her heel down onto his instep, crushing the small bones of his foot. Gunwoo roared in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Nari dropped to the ground, rolling away. Thwip. Thwip. 2 shots. Silent. Deadly. Gunwoo jerked backward. A neat red hole appeared in the center of his forehead. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. URA screamed, a primal shriek of rage. She turned to run, but Juna Seo was already there. He tackled her, pinning her to the ground, cuffing her hands behind her back with efficient brutality. Daehyun didn't even look at them. He holstered his weapon and sprinted toward Nari. He felt his knees, sliding on the concrete, and pulled her into his arms. He was shaking. The Dragon of Seoul was shaking. Nari, he gasped, his hands frantically checking her for wounds. Nari, look at me. Are you hurt? She looked up at him, breathless, bruised, her neck throbbing where Gunwoo had choked her. My brother. Safe, Daehyun promised, his voice fierce. He is safe. My men are with him. Your grandmother is safe. I have been tracking you since you left the tower. I never took my eyes off you. Nari collapsed against his chest, sobbing. I thought I lost you. You will never lose me, Daehyun whispered into her hair, holding her so tight it almost hurt. I told you. You don't own me? You were wrong. You own me, Nari-song. You have owned me since the moment you walked into that room. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the raw, exposed nerve of their emotions. Why did you come yourself? She asked, touching the tactical vest he wore. You're the chairman. You shouldn't be here. Because some things, Daehyun said, his eyes burning with intensity, cannot be delegated. And because I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch you. He leaned in. The distance between them vanished. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of rain and fear and relief. It was a promise. It was a seal on a contract that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with souls. When they finally broke apart, Junesio approached, dragging a struggling, screaming URA. "Boss," Junesio said. "What do we do with her?" Daehyun stood up, pulling Nari with him, keeping her tucked firmly under his arm. He looked at URA, his former fiancé, with eyes as cold as the grave. "Take her to her father," Daehyun said. "And tell Chairman Han that the wedding is off. Tell him. The war has begun." The drive away from the factory was a blur of neon lights streaking across rain-slicked windows, but inside the armored SUV, the world was quiet. Daehyun held Nari against him, his arm a steel band of protection that refused to loosen even for a second. He didn't speak of the violence they had just left behind. He didn't need to. His silence was a vow. Every time Nari shivered, the aftershocks of adrenaline coursing through her veins, his grip tightened, grounding her, reminding her that the nightmare was over. She looked at his hand, the knuckles bruised from where he had struck Gunwoo, and she realized that the blood on his hands had been for her. He had stained his soul to keep hers clean. 6 months is a long time in the world of power, enough time for empires to fall and new ones to rise from the ashes. Nari stood in the center of the chairman's office at the newly christened Kong Tech Solutions. The space had changed. The oppressive, dark furniture of the crime syndicate days was gone, replaced by sleek, open aesthetics, glass, polished wood, and light. It was a physical manifestation of the cleansing fire Nari had brought into Daehyun's life. She wasn't wearing a polyester delivery uniform anymore. She stood in a tailored cream suit that hugged her frame, her hair styled in soft waves, looking every inch the chief security officer of Korea's fastest-growing cybersecurity firm. She looked out at the Seoul skyline, watching the city breathe, no longer a ghost haunting its streets, but a titan standing atop them. The heavy oak door clicked open. Nari didn't turn. She knew the rhythm of those footsteps. She knew the weight of that presence. Daehyun walked in. The tension that used to coil in his shoulders, the perpetual readiness of a predator, had softened. He still carried the aura of a king, but he was no longer a king at war. "The merger is complete," he said, coming to stand beside her, close enough that their arms brushed. "The remnants of the Han family operations have been dismantled. URA and her father have fled to Macau. They won't be coming back." Nari nodded, feeling the final knot of anxiety in her chest loosen. The war had been brutal, fought in boardrooms and back alleys, but Daehyun had been relentless. He had torn down the old world to build a safe one for her. "And the update on your grandmother?" Daehyun asked, his voice dropping to that gentle register he reserved only for her. Nari smiled, and it was a smile that reached her eyes, bright and unburdened. "Clean scan. The doctors at Seoul National say the remission is stable. She's talking about taking a gardening class. And my brother just made the dean's list at the academy. He wants to study cryptography." Daehyun chuckled, sliding his hand into hers, intertwining their fingers. "It runs in the family. Though I hope he has better manners than to hack my personal vault." "He learns from the best," Nari teased, leaning her head against his shoulder. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun dip below the Han River, painting the water in strokes of gold and violet. "You saved them, you know," Daehyun said quietly. "You credit the doctors and the tutors, but it was you. You never gave up. Even when the world was crushing you, you held them up. You gave me the strength to do it," Nari whispered. "You gave me a chance when I was drowning." Daehyun turned to face her. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, velvet box. It wasn't a showy gesture. There was no audience, no fireworks, no press release. Just 2 people in a room high above the world. "I had planned to do this in Paris," Daehyun admitted, a rare flicker of nervousness crossing his features. "Or perhaps at the new seaside villa. But I find that I cannot wait another day. I cannot wait another hour." He opened the box. Inside sat a diamond. It wasn't the size of a rock. It was elegant, flawless, a perfect solitaire set in platinum. It was a study in understated perfection. "Nari Song," Daehyun said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You changed the code of my life. You rewrote the algorithm of who I am. Before you, I was just surviving in the dark. You brought the light. I don't want to build this empire alone. I don't want to wake up another morning without you. He took the ring from the box. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my equal, my wife? Nari looked at the ring, then up at the man who had once terrified her, the man who had risked everything to pull her out of a factory in Malidong. She saw the scars he carried, and she loved him for every single one of them. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Daehyun. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled her in, kissing her with a depth of passion that made the floor beneath them feel unsteady. It was a kiss of victory. They had won. 6 years later, the morning sun was warm on the pavement outside the Seoul Hope Foundation in Gumho-dong. The building, once a derelict warehouse, was now a gleaming center of glass and steel, a beacon in the middle of Nari's old neighborhood. Nari stood by the entrance, holding a tablet, checking the roster for the new intake of students. These weren't kids from wealthy families. They were street kids, delivery riders, dropouts, kids who had brilliance hiding behind dirty faces and hungry eyes. Kids just like she had been. Director Song, a young boy called out, running up the steps with a backpack slung over one shoulder. I finished the Python module. The code works. I knew it would, Minho. Nari beamed, ruffling his hair. Go get set up in Lab 3. She watched him run inside, her heart swelling with pride. This was her legacy. Not just the tech company, but this. Giving the ghosts of Seoul a chance to be seen. A hand rested on the small of her back. Nari leaned into it instinctively. Daehyun stood beside her. He was older now, a few silver strands in his hair, lines of laughter etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was in a casual sweater, looking relaxed, happy. You look like you're about to cry, he noted softly. I was just thinking, Nari said, looking at the sign above the door. About the day we met. About the noodles. Daehyun laughed, the sound rich and warm. I still owe you for that delivery fee, don't I? With interest, Nari retorted, grinning. Compound interest. Daehyun wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, watching the students file into the building that his money had built, but her heart had designed. Do you remember what I told you? He asked. That day in the factory? That some things cannot be delegated? That, he nodded. And that I would burn the city down for you. You didn't have to burn it down, Nari whispered, turning in his arms to face him, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. You just had to help me rebuild it. You saved me, Nari, Daehyun said, his eyes serious, filled with a love that had only grown deeper with time. I was a monster waiting to happen. You made me a man. We saved each other, she corrected him. That's what the pattern is. Two broken lines, intersecting to make something unbreakable. They stood there in the sunlight, the former crime lord and the delivery girl, watching the future walk through the doors of the foundation. They had defied every odd, broken every rule, and rewritten their destiny. Nari looked at the camera, breaking the fourth wall for just a moment, her eyes shining with the wisdom of a woman who had walked through fire and come out carrying water for others. This story of how a simple delivery girl changed a criminal empire forever reminds us that brilliance can be found in the most unexpected places, and that love is the only code that truly matters. Has anyone ever underestimated you? Share your story in the comments below, because your voice deserves to be heard. If Nari's journey from the rain-soaked streets to the top of the world touched your heart, please smash that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on all notifications if you haven't already. We share stories of incredible transformations and undying love every single week. Thank you for watching until the end. From wherever you are watching in the world, remember, you are the author of your own story. This is Afro Soul Love Tales signing off.